Tony Stark is really a person rebuilding himself, redefining himself. It was an interesting progression from where we left it last time, because last time he said, I'm not going to make weapons. Well, what has he been doing? Well, what he's doing is he's trying to bring people together, and he's trying to look forward to a brighter future. And I think Tony takes it a step further here, brings about the Stark Expo, continuing the tradition his father started, the aspect of his father that was not involved with making weapons and blowing things up, but instead looking towards the future. It was the Walt Disney aspect of Howard Stark, who saw technology as a portal to a better future. But that dream had subsequently been abandoned after '74, and that World's Fair type of expo that he had organized had been left fallow, and now Tony decided to take on that mantle and decide to bring about the expo.
When this whole thing started, we had this moment from, I think it's like Iron Man Armored Adventures, which is like our kids series, and it was Stark World. It's like giving this like Macworld Steve Jobs type keynote speech, and it very quickly went from like this one little image to this gigantic expo, and next thing you know, Mike Reeve, our production designer, has a guy drawing buildings, and you see all these like huge wide shots, and people are photographing Flushing Meadow Park from above in a helicopter, and you're like, whoa, whoa, how did this all come together so quickly?
Everyone is coming to the New York World's Fair. They're coming from the four corners of the earth. There's the symbol of the fair, the Great Unisphere.
We've modeled it on the famous 1964 World's Fair in Flushing Meadow.
John being literally from right across the street, he literally was from Queens, in his apartment right onto the site of the 1964 New York World's Fair. So he has a love for it.
And this is the whole thing with this is I grew up literally right across the street from this right here.
Yeah.
And so when I see this come to, I never saw the World's Fair for real. It's really fun doing this. It's particularly interesting watching these plates that I'm so familiar. I know all these views, except for the helicopter stuff, and then see what you guys are doing with it. It's really fun.
He grew up not far from that giant pavilion, which we called it, which is actually was called the Tent of Tomorrow. We ended up designing pretty much the whole flow of the chase and all the stuff that's in the end of the movie. And once you've done that, you figure out what all the things you actually have to have. Then you start breaking it down into what you're actually going to build. Illustrations we do models. You try through all those different ways to explain exactly how these pieces fit together. Because they're so massive, you can't build them all in one place. You have to break them up a little bit here and there. So we ended up breaking up the stage.
The interior Tent of Tomorrow we have to build because there's not a set that had that kind of video screen or size that we needed.
I love the ironettes. Did you see those girls?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Whoops a daisy. 1, 2, 3. That's it, Kylac. 6, 7, 8.
Tony has spent a small fortune on recreating this Stark Expo. He built it greater and bigger and grander than anyone could ever have imagined.
The set's very impressive. We build the interior. We're going to build the promenade. We were lucky to find the Sepulveda Dam.
Part of the movie magic for the expo and going to all these different locations was that we would take some of the same elements to different locations.
The dressing has to kind of, flow from one to the other or whatever.
It is not just being on the ground. There's a lot of aerial work that goes into those sequences, too.
We're doing some work with both our spider cam and our mini helicopter, shooting plates into which will comp our CG Iron Man and drones that are for the chase sequence in the final battle.
Now that Stark Expo has become the huge centerpiece in the film that kind of bookends the movie. We're going to all that much trouble. Well, then that should be where the finale happens.
There's a big sequence that happens as the drones are following War Machine and Iron Man.
The Japanese garden is a separate set in itself. We only built a portion of that.
This is the star of the film.
No.
That's right, the star of the film.
No. I'm just the man who stands next to the man. What's this piece of tech right here?
This is the War Machine helmet, without the faceplate, mind you.
Should we put it on? Show them how it works.
Are you ready?
cut out. Fight at the end. It's a combination of original design, existing buildings, building sets that we put together. Yannick, our visual effects person, that'll be his daunting task, and making it look like one location.
That's nice. That I like that, grabbing that zoom and him having trouble holding him in the zoom. All that's fun. So let's look at it. Let's look at it from the beginning. I let those guys off the leash, and the ideas just poured forth. They're just torrent of ideas coming at you with such enthusiasm. And they would say, "Dude, make sound effects," and then this happens, and I shoot and this explodes up, and it was just great. And I would just be charmed by it. I mean, yes, we'll do it. And everybody would say, "How are we going to do that?" I was like, "Don't we'll figure it out. We're not going to do all of it." There seemed to be an inspired current that was running through society where an interesting combination of a tremendous cynicism about the economy and where we fit in, but also this tremendous forward-looking, inspired mission that we were going to change the way we fit into the world and the way we interacted with our environment, with each other, with other nations. And the Stark Expo felt like it somehow tied into that. It felt like it was part of the zeitgeist. And that Tony was at the forefront of this film. Visual effects we've been working on for a long time. A tiny fraction of the effects are in. We're working off of temp effects. Those won't all be in for another month. And we have to make slight picture changes always to accommodate that.
So for you, you do your landing, boom, boom.
The first half hour of being in the Iron Man suit is like the coolest Halloween you ever had, except you're alone in the trailer before they call you on a set or whatever, or you're getting ready and you just catch a glimpse and you go, "That's right. Grandma'd be proud." Shane Mahan and all the guys are geniuses, literally. Suit yourself.
Everybody knew, like, and Marvel especially, like, it can't look like a guy in a suit. That was the interesting challenge of getting the right proportion of the suit to the girth of the shoulders, to the size of the head. Make it as small as you possibly can. Make the legs as long as you possibly can. Then Robert Downey was cast when most of the model was kind of done. Then we had to scan him and kind of fit him in from the hips up, still purport, because he had to operate the thing.
2, 1, go!
But we found some really great and talented stuntmen performers that were very athletic, very fit. They fit lengthwise into the suit as well as the upper proportions. And the audition basically was, can you fit this helmet on? Because if you can't fit the helmet, you can't be in Iron Man suit. There were guys just trying so hard, like, "Oh, I can do it," like, you know.
Oh, is this what I think it is?
Yes, it is.
We call this the autopsy body. The technicians and the Air Force and Army brass are going to be taking this apart to sort of see how it works.
We built 2 practical hero suits and like 4 stunt suits, and and then we built the Mark II. Was actually a hybrid. I mean, it was half fiberglass and half rubber, so you could get some flexing in it as well. So now we're able to get this kind of compression with the ribs. So it gives the actor a little more flexibility in bending side to side.
What we had going against this was that we're creating this, armored suit on a man that's going to move like an acrobat and a fighter, but is clearly more robotic. First of all, how do you get around that convention and that physical problem? And how do you create that world and still make it feel like it's actually happening?
We were originally asked just to provide some reference pieces for them to film, and then they were going to do a lot of CG work. As the scope of the project developed, they realized that that it would work better if they had some more practical elements involved in it, and it just started expanding into us actually putting a guy into the suit, and ended up using a lot of it with the man in the suit.
Jon Favreau knows the limits, the parameters. He knows how much the actors are willing to put into it.
In this film, they're going to do mostly motion capture for the legs.
Replacing the legs helps the actors on set be a little bit more mobile than they could be with the entire suit. On the first one, we really had them dressed up in the entire suit, and it was really awkward to walk around in. So For the second movie, we really want to try and free them up so that they can perform as best as they could.
Is that thing up higher than it was? I have no idea where it's going.
I think, like John, want to do as much of it practically as possible. To me, some of the best stuff, the best visual effects are just stuff that we shot practically, or the Mark I suit.
Favreau always is pushing that aesthetic. He wants to believe the camera move. He wants to believe that it could be shot by somebody on a platform somewhere. He's always asking about the map.
At that point, they could start to rotate, and we could be doing this.
Even though we know we're gonna have to rely on digital effects, the goal in conception is to figure out where the camera would be if this thing was really happening. Because then the film's a little more honest and then it's rooted in reality. And I think that was successful about one.
He really strives to at least have a grounding, solid, practical camera move, a grounding element in the scene, as much as possible in the plate that's real.
Shooting practical elements seems big and expensive, but it's actually less expensive than the type of digital work that would be required. And even digital work, they'll go out and shoot elements on their own. Rarely do they build something out of nothing.
We always try to have it live and practical. When you can, you do. When you can't, you always look at a practical reference so you can either match it or augmentate it.
We learned in the first one that the more practical elements you could shoot and the smarter you were in the way that you conceive of the shots, and the less you're asking of your vendors to create out of nothing, the more likely you are to achieve something that fools the audience.
We use the suits throughout scenes just to get capture, reference. You know, we get a really good sense of what the lighting is, how they respond to lighting, and we really strive to have shots where you cut practical suit, CG suit, practical suit, CG suit, and you don't know what is what.
Here I am, baby. NorCal.
When you look back on 2, because ILM and the various houses did such a great job, they were able to embellish upon that reality so well that we relied more on digital, ironically, in 2, and because we had learned so much about what we could accomplish. And we used less of the physical realities, and we ended up relying more on the digital side of things, but still maintaining an idea for the camera that would be rooted in reality.
Between us and visual effects, we really came to the conclusion of physical start, physical end with a soft, gooey texture of digital in between, maybe with a few more shots.
I told you to shut it down.
The house fight scene is a lot of fun. It's gone through a lot of changes, but we saw a cut of the film yesterday, and it's pretty much gelled now.
It's a pretty extensive sequence, so I mean, a lot of these, you know, dust maps and things that we're making are going to carry it on throughout the entire house fight.
I'm going to start layering on dust after different progressions of the fight. So I've got him, and I'm going to have to put some dust on his shoulders and the back of his head.
We're working on doing some digital destruction to the Stark house to represent the damage that's kind of sustained while he and Rhodey are fighting each other in the Iron Man suits.
We will give John exactly what he wants. You know what, I want to destroy more of this. I know that I want Iron Man to lift his head and break through this fireplace right here, so we should start planning on what kind of debris is going to fall off his head. Should the explosion be bigger, what should we do with the fire?
You know, the fireplace seems kind of a little bit undented, undamaged after he pulls himself out. So we sort of up the intensity of the damage. The whole wall gets caved in as Iron Man hits it, and then you have a much larger fire explosion element.
This is just one of many effects on this model. So this is going to be the concrete dust pass. There's a specularity pass, there's a color pass, all of that.
This is the map that he has painted for me so far, and in this particular thing, is the damage of the dust is on the back of his shoulders and back of his head and stuff like that. There's a few areas that are still in progress, so that's why they're gray and yellow at the moment. This is showing me that it's not done yet.
Definitely up the ante as far as how things work, kind of keeping that whole feel that things are supposed to be real within the film.
It takes a lot of work to get it right, to make the lighting match up and make it so that You know, but visual effects is one of those areas where if you do your job perfectly, nobody notices that you did anything.
S.H.I.E.L.D. is one of the most interesting properties that's ever been created here at Marvel because it has its roots firmly entrenched in the 1960s, very much into the whole, spy genre that was huge back then, from James Bond to I Spy, you name it.
So it was Marvel's take on that, but it was also uniquely Marvel, tied in brilliantly with the Marvel Universe.
It's the through line. S.H.I.E.L.D. is the area where you can go back and connect this world in a way that's relatable and let everyone else be kind of who they are.
They sort of are the Da Vinci Code-esque kind of branch of the Marvel Universe, where every mystery is known by them and cataloged by them and saved till the point where they could probably figure it out. Regular people just can't do this, so we're sending the A-team.
They're pulling the strings, they're protecting society. This is the thing that was built to kind of interact with things that are beyond what a regular man generally could deal with, but they do.
We have this great grizzled war vet, Nick Fury, Sergeant Fury, who ends up running this international organization, peacekeeping organization.
This is a way of taking a character who you think might have been misplaced in the 60s and finding a place for him. This was a hard-bitten, tough guy, and yet he was a fantastic choice to run the S.H.I.E.L.D. organization.
Nick is Nick. I mean, and you kind of take him for granted. I think the choices they made in the Ultimates was very much to make people pay attention to the book, pay attention to Marvel, and say, we're willing to play with our characters in a way that we think will make them more relatable now.
What if they were born 40 years later? And what if they were trying to create the Marvel Universe today? How would they envision it? How would it be different? So we created this whole new Marvel Universe that was based around different sciences and modern-day technology and modern-day attitudes of people. We sort of re-envisioned S.H.I.E.L.D., and S.H.I.E.L.D. became more of a militaristic force as opposed to just a peacekeeping force. Still international, but much more proactive in what it was that they were doing. We created Nick Fury as an African-American character, which we felt was something that we needed to do.
The movie version, very inspired by the Ultimates version with the help of Mr. Jackson, and he's proven to be very cooperative on the publishing side also.
When I was a kid, Nick Fury was a white guy running through the jungle with a whole bunch of other white guys. And then he was David Hasselhoff, and then all of a sudden I picked up a book one day and it's like, hey, that's me. Oh, wow, hey, I'm Nick Fury.
This Nick Fury kind of reflected that he would get involved in your private life, that he would investigate you without your knowledge, and that he wasn't quite the good guy, that he had a darker side to him, which Nick Fury, when he was running S.H.I.E.L.D. back in the 60s, that was never really explored.
He's kind of got something behind him. You don't know what his pure motivations are, which is not unusual when you're dealing with a secret governmental society.
This guy would face you down and interfere with your life.
Straight from the Ultimates. I mean, that's why we cast him. We thought fans would go crazy if Sam Jackson showed up with an eye patch and he looked just like he did in the books. When we contacted his people, we were like, we need him for half a day. And I think we did that half a day in the first picture on a Saturday. No one was supposed to know. We didn't even let him walk from his trailer to the set. We drove his car onto the stage, parked it next to the set. He did his thing, got back in the car, drove back to his trailer. We were so convinced that no one's ever gonna find out. It's gonna be such a secret. It is so on super duper lockdown, but it was so cool, such big news that by Monday, it was all over the place.
When I look at comic books, I always see them as movies anyway. I have for a very long time. So all of a sudden it was like, well, I got this job. I don't have to audition. I don't have to do anything. I just got to wait on the green light the movie and I'm in. I was, all in favor of it. Plus, I've always liked, Nick Fury. Even when he was a white guy, I liked him. He was very cool.
Sam Jackson has tremendous screen presence, and he's the character that the ultimate Nick Fury was based on. So just the idea that we stuck him in the first one was a bit of a lark.
It's like some sort of cruel joke, to throw Nick Fury in at the end, it was obviously intentional, but the writers who put Nick Fury into the end of Iron Man 1, it's sort of one of these to me, passing it forward, saying like, all right, now you deal with it.
He makes a return appearance and hits Tony Stark when he's perhaps at his lowest point. We wanted his energy to be that of like a grizzled AA sponsor who's sort of been there and was going to confront the guy on a level, both lovingly but unflinchingly.
You let your friend fly off with your suit. Now, if I didn't know better.
You don't know better. I didn't give it to him, he took it.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. He took it? You're Iron Man, and he took the suit from you? You know, people can take things from Iron Man, and he can't take them back? Is that right? I'm here to give some exposition. Maybe next time I'll get to kick some ass. I go slow. The same thing happened in Star Wars. You know, I showed up, I didn't do anything, went to a funeral. Next time I showed up, I kind of sat there and talked to some people. Next time I got to kick some ass. Works out.
I had an image of him sitting in that donut, hungover, eating donuts, and that's what he does with the suit, and that's his life. And then it sort of led to Nick Fury being there, and then them just sharing a cup of coffee. I figured we could get away with a lot more if we were there sipping a cup of coffee at Randy's Donuts than if we had some stainless steel and black high-tech shield underground, you know, bunker, which is the original conceit.
I'm just glad that he saw fit to continue to include me in this particular thing and to make my character such an integral part of pushing the story along, making sure that people understand the history of who the characters are and what their relationships are, even in terms of my relationship with his father and being around for a while before. And hopefully that will carry over into the other films in terms of who I am, how old I actually am, and what I know about the world.
He's a uniquely Marvel character. There's no real counterpart to him, I think, in any other comics universe. There's nobody like Nick Fury.
And you have this temptress, shape-shifting female character, Black Widow, played exquisitely by Scarlett Johansson. She starts off as Natalie Rushman, the femme fatale assistant that Pepper knows something's wrong with.
In walks this young, gorgeous bombshell and really throws Pepper off her course, you know.
Will that be all, Mr. Stark?
Yes, that will be all, Ms. Rushman. Thank you very much.
This idea of this temptress that comes in and tries to break up the relationship, it adds that little bit of spark between the characters.
I want one.
No.
You sure?
Yes.
She turns out to be a member of S.H.I.E.L.D., and she is more of a compatriot of Tony's than a love interest.
Black Widow was a very, very interesting character because when she first appeared, she was not even costumed. She was this vampish kind of Soviet agent.
The Black Widow, again, is another one of those wonderful characters that springs from the 60s spy genre. She's a Russian defector. She came out of a project called The Red Room, where she was taught to be the perfect Russian spy. She started as a ballerina, and then she comes to the States and becomes a part of the superhero community here and rebels against, you know, her Cold War masters of the past. And it's the perfect name for her because she's beautiful and she's deadly.
She was very, very three-dimensional, as was Clint Barton, Hawkeye, because the relationship between the two of them was something that had a great deal of subtlety to it. The way she would play him and the way he would play up to her, the way he needed her approval, even though he kind of played a bit of a tough guy. And so Natasha, at the same time, having this kind of femme fatale quality, made her a very, very interesting character. I've always felt that she was a fascinating character with many facets to her personality.
She has that espionage-y feel. Scarlett being chosen makes her feel just really cool and sexy, but it contemporizes in a way, it makes people think about the character in a fresher, younger way. It's the harder challenge with Natasha and her character was it was very much a product of the Cold War ideology. With this reimagining through the Ultimates and then the movie and then Scarlett coming in and making people pay attention to the character and say, this is young, sexy, and cool, it allows us to play with reinventing the character and kind of get away from the Cold War analogies. More a product of what's going on in the world today, which makes it a little bit easier to relate to the character.
What can we say about Scarlett Johansson embodying her, except that she's absolutely cool. I mean, she looks beautiful. Her moves on screen are choreographed in a way that are beautiful and ballet-like, but yet really vicious. I mean, she doesn't just, you know, give these people a light punch to the chin. I mean, she takes people out.
I think that the possibilities are really endless as far as, you know, Black Widow's involvement with the Marvel Universe. It's just whether the fans are kind of demanding of the studio what they want to see.
We set up in the first film, Rhodey, Tony, best friends. One is a very dedicated military man. Tony is the lone gunman out there by himself.
We knew that we wanted Rhodey to put on the Mark II suit and that the Mark II would be the basis of War Machine.
War Machine in our film is based upon the suit that Tony builds first in Iron Man 1. He goes on his first flight, he crashes through the house, and he puts it in the Hall of Armor. Over the course of the sequel, Rhodey gets his hands on that, brings it back to the military, and the military believes that they have the rights to this armor.
Let's take it inside. In this film, Rhodey is going to take much more ownership of not just the suit, but sort of the idea of what the suit should be for and what the duty of anyone who has that kind of awesome power, what their responsibility is to the greater good.
I don't think it should be lost on the viewers of the movie or people who read the comic books that here is this Iron Man armor that now is filled with weapons, which is sort of kind of what Tony fought against earlier on in his career, but sort of a necessary evil. And he doesn't even put himself in that armor. He puts James Rhodes in that armor because he feels he's the only guy who can make the right decisions with an armor like that. And I think that's really, what makes Rhodey such an integral character in the Iron Man mythos.
Rhodey has a different perspective on life than Tony. It's probably a little bit more about, patriotism, service, doing what you think needs to be done for everybody.
Cheadle, as James Rhodes, walks that very fine line of being a man of duty and being a friend to Tony Stark, and trying to understand what Tony's ultimate motivations and goals are with the armor, but at the same time trying to do his job as a soldier of the United States Army and following orders and listening to his higher commands.
War Machine lives up to his name. It's all about offensive weaponry, whereas Iron Man has weapons, but at the same time he has many other functions in the armor. There are many other things that the armor does. War Machine is pretty much geared towards blowing you away. And he doesn't hide the weaponry. It's on his shoulders, it's everywhere. So this character is sort of a souped-up version of Iron Man with the emphasis really on the offensive weaponry and going on the attack.
You've got adapted from the comics. There are many, many different looks of all of the characters in our comics over the years. And we take what we believe are the signature looks, the markings, making it much more militarized than something Tony would design himself. Suddenly, the color differences aside, you're not going to mistake one for the other. There's a big difference between the silhouette of Iron Man and the silhouette of War Machine. And they need to have their distinct characters. Even when the masks are closed, you want to feel the different characterizations and the differences between them.
We played around with having a War Machine type suit in the first film, a Mark IV. But it was like, we don't mind combining things sometimes, but it just seemed like that should be War Machine. And so the part of it is, how is War Machine and Iron Man different? How are they competitive? What's that friendship? How is that an extension of their friendship? How does Rhodey change when he puts it on? In the comics, he actually goes mad because it's Tony's suit. We don't really go down that road, but we do show that maybe Rhodey's getting to be a little bit more of an individualist than he might have been.
You look back at Rhodey through the comic books, and he is, so different in every, different iteration of who he is, depending on who the artist was, depending on who the story creator was. So it's a dynamic that continues to shift and change, and you have to try and cull the best of what all of that mythology was and try and come together with all the disparate pieces of this film and decide, okay, who is he for this movie, and what's the best, sort of combination of all of those different things that works well for this movie. Oh man, you can have your suit back.
DJ AM, Adam Goldstein, I didn't know him personally, but I knew his stuff.
I've done some sick house parties, but right now I am in Tony Stark's house, in his living room with my own DJ booth and about to get funky for the crowd.
AM was a very genuine guy, and I wasn't the best director that week because I would always go up to him and be like, show me something, tell me something, show me something. And he would show me things and always be encouraging.
He's directing a multi-million-dollar movie, and the second everyone goes cut and everything, he runs back over and grabs the headphones. Hopefully got us.
Always encouraging and always great. And I thought of something cool we could do, and actually he's in the movie. I said, if you stay, I know you can't, I'll come back.
Goldstein.
Yes, Mr. Stark.
Give me a fat beat to beat my buddy's ass.
So he ended up being there for like a week for the whole party, and it was great. I got to spend some time with him away from it, and he really, he taught me some things about DJing, but he also was just, I heard him out what he was going through in his life, and how he was going through a rough time, and I didn't even know it. He never let, not that I was his closest friend, but I definitely felt connected to him, and when he passed, it was very, it hit me very, very hard for as short of a time as I knew him. And we thanked him at the end. of the film. It was really nice at the end. It's like in memory of Adam Goldstein with the little AC/DC lightning bolt in the middle of it. He had fun on it, and it was a real gift to be able to share a few months at least with the guy and get to know him, and hopefully his family and friends find comfort and able to see that and see him, and hopefully it brings back nice memories for them.